G'day folks. I built a set of custom radiator guards for my last bike that a couple of people asked me about. So I thought I would share how I'm making the same set for this new bike. I had a couple of priorities when it came to making these radiator guards. They needed to work, be inexpensive, and be field serviceable in case I needed to clean or remove them when I was out on the track. For the Sertao, that meant they could not sit behind the air ducts. This air duct is a structural component that holds the fairing in place. If I want to remove the duct, I have to remove the seat and the fairing, etc. That would make accessing them in the field a very, very frustrating experience. So I decided to put them in front of the duct. Putting it in front of the duct also creates some space between the guard and the radiator that might come in handy as a crumple zone for a particularly large impact. The challenge is that the front of the air duct is not flat or square, so attaching a grill to it can be a bit tricky. All up, these custom guards cost me about 40 Aussie dollars. The main parts I used were these captive nuts from Supercheap Auto. They were the most expensive component, but I was impatient, so I had to buy them there and then. They cost me $32 for 8 of them. I have no doubt that I could have got them cheaper online if I was willing to wait. And the other main part of this was a cooking rack that I bought at the supermarket for $6. Plus I had some nuts and bolts lying around and some epoxy putty that I used. I removed the fairing and pulled the air duct off, and then I used some scrap cardboard to trace the shape of the grill. Start large and work your way down. Trim and fit, trim and fit, trim and fit. I originally cut off too much and so I had to start again, but that is exactly why I used cardboard. Bit by bit, I refined the fit, making fold lines as I went. Once I was happy with the rough fit, I transferred the outline to the baking rack. A silver marker came in really handy here. Again, I cut this a little bit large so that I could trim it down as I went. Basically, it is a matter of bend, fit, trim, and repeat. Once I was happy with the fit, I worked on attaching the captive nuts to the air duct. The leading edges of the duct are shaped in a specific way to avoid interference with the forks when the steering is turned. Therefore, I didn't want the captive nuts to protrude at all. Once I was happy with where they generally wanted to sit, I marked the location and then used a hand file and a Dremel to cut a rebate into the plastic so that they would sit flush. I then marked and drilled the holes. I made these holes a little bit oversized to give me some wiggle room in the final setup. The back side of the captive nut has sharp edges and pointy corners, and that is also where houses and wires sit on the bike. The last thing I wanted was a damaged wire or punctured radiator hose, either through rubbing or in the event of a crash. So to prevent any issues, I used the epoxy putty to round off the shape of the captive nut and smooth out the edges. To do this, I put some sacrificial bolts in and applied the putty. The next morning, I pulled the nuts out before the putty was fully cured to stop it from locking onto the bolts. I gave them a sand and a file to smooth off the edges and round them over. Lastly, I gave everything a good coat of black marker to help it blend together on the bike. I reinstalled the air ducts on the bike and then installed the grills on front of them. The back of the nuts have no more sharp edges and so are unlikely to chafe against any wires or hoses. The grill is surprisingly strong and they don't interfere with the forks when the bike is turned. And they can be easily removed if they clog up with mud or grass when I'm in the bush. I hope some of you find this handy and let me know if you made something similar or if you can improve on this design. Cheers.